All right. So, good evening, everybody. This is the November workshop for L&D Philly. Thank you all for joining us. To kick us off, couple of announcements, just upcoming stuff that's going on. So, as always, if you come to our webpage, you'll see lots of good stuff of what we have going on in the slides as they're going by here, some of our upcoming events. As we come down the page, we can take a look and see what's coming next. So we're here tonight for being a great trainer isn't enough, and we're going to find out what is. Ooh, teaser. And then next month, we're having a session on conducting an effective job search in a virtual environment. Unfortunately, layoffs have started to come back into fashion. Hopefully not for long, but some of us, including myself, have been impacted and thought this was a good opportunity to pivot to a program on looking at job hunting. For some people, they may not have done it since the world changed a little bit with virtual and hybrid in the pandemic. And so some tips on how to do that. And also just even if you have or want to get a good refresher, it's a great opportunity. Our friend Amy Dinning is going to take us through that. And it's she's an expert on networking and job searching, and it also runs on her own some programming to do that work. So we're looking forward to having her come in. Once we get to the new year, as we're done celebrating the 2023 coming in, we're going to start looking at the now and next of learning technology. So to kick off the year, see what we've got in learning tech, what's coming, what we can use. A lot of good tools in that, and that's David Kelly's going to be leading that from the Learning Guild. Then in February, and I know we're already we're already getting close to the end of winter and spring here, but Cindy Huggett has a book coming out. I think it's actually coming out in the next month or so here on facilitator skills. Again, with the change in the world, more into virtual classrooms, it's kind of the next level of that. And so she has a book that being put out by ATD, and she's going to run us through some of the important points in that. And then we get into a session in March on titled "Unlock What's Next" by Amplifying What Exists. And Rick Lozano is an interesting member of our community. If you haven't had the chance to see him, he weaves music into his presentation. So there'll be some guitar playing, some fun activities to be had, and good opportunity to learn some new things. So that's what we've got coming up on our upcoming schedule. As always, if there's anything you're looking for or anything you might be interested in, please reach out to us. You can either hit me up directly or go to info@ldphilly.com and drop us a note, and we can see what we can put together. So that's our upcoming programming. On the flip side here, we've got our partner and sponsor events. So a bunch of things going on in the organizations in the community here. Again, we've got some things on culture coming up. I think that first one that's the next week, Culture is King, is our friend Teresa Hummel-Kraulinger giving a presentation. And there's more events in this too. If you go through and look at the View Partner Events button there, you'll get to even more than what's there. But some good stuff coming up. Mark, yours is one of them. Did you want to say anything about the leadership in ODSIG? I know I didn't prep you for this, so there may be mute button issues or other things, but I'll give you a couple more seconds. Anyway, Mark's events are always good. I'm sure it'll be great. He may have had an issue there, but check it out. Go to the link. You'll get all the details. Moving along. So if you are indeed starting to look for things, or if you are hiring, all members can post jobs to the job board. If you are not a member and looking to post something, just reach out to us and we'll post it for you. As people who are visiting our site as job hunters, anybody can view the job board. And if there's anything of interest to you, please check it out. Got our Twitter feed there, so feel free to follow us on Twitter. You'll see some of our same kind of things, alerts as to what's coming up. And a quick moment just to thank our sponsors. So Judge Learning Solutions is our website sponsor. You can find them literally on every page on our website. Two main things that they do. One is, again, the theme here about potentially getting jobs, is they do job placement. So if you are looking, they may have opportunities that they can match you up with. Likewise, if you're hiring and looking for talent, they can help you there as well. Excuse me. The other thing they do is custom content development. So if you're looking to find some assistance in putting content together, please go check them out and visit. And then we've got our other two sponsors here, Degreed. Degreed provides a learning experience platform. And so it's a way to be able to bring in material and track and develop learning paths for people that may be on typical LMS stuff, being in from multiple sources. And again, more about that by clicking on their info. They're also our email sponsor, so you can find them at the top of every email and every weekly email we send out. And also includes a link to a report there with some additional details about some of the things going on in the what's happening in L&D right now. And then Training Pros is a sponsor of our job board, as we've already talked about. So those are our sponsors. Thank you all for attending tonight. So that's pretty much enough from me. So let me give Kevin a chance here to get set up and do a little bit of an introduction. So I'm really excited that we were able to find a time for Kevin, and more importantly, that we got time on his schedule for him to come and speak to us. As I told him, I've got his formal intro here, which I'm going to do, and then small storytelling. So Kevin has spent 30 years helping organizations and leaders from over 40 countries become more effective. Inc.com has twice named him in the top 100 leadership and management experts in the world. His books include Remarkable Leadership, From Bud to Boss, The Long Distance Leader, and his next book is The Long Distance Teammate. Seeing a theme here of the virtual stuff we've been talking about. His blogs and videos are among the most read, watched, and shared in the leadership world. So I said a little bit of story, and I will make this brief, but as Kevin and I were just talking about briefly before we started the recording, I went to the ATD International Conference last May in Orlando, and I was walking around with my friend Amy Dinning, who is our speaker next month, and we started approaching Kevin's booth. She said, we got to go over there. And wanted to make sure that if anybody that I met in the expo hall floor, that I was going to meet Kevin, because of how much a fan she is and how important the work that he does is to what we do. So that's why I'm excited about this. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Josh. And good afternoon, good evening. I should say good evening, everybody. And glad to be with you for a little while on a apparently for most of you rainy Tuesday evening. And so while Josh said that I do all this work around leadership development, that's really not the topic tonight. And so the topic tonight is being a great trainer isn't enough. And so I'm using the word trainer here, but you might say instructional designer, whatever word you want to put in there in our L&D world. I want you to just use that word if you say, well, I'm not a trainer. I'm guessing if you're not a trainer at some level, you might not have chosen to arrive, but that's what I want you to know and be thinking about in relationship to that. So give me one more second to get myself organized. Here we go. So I am really glad you're here. And I do want to do a quick poll. And so perhaps I can get those to show. Maybe I can't. Can you start the poll for me?
Yes, I can.
It's a simple poll. This describes my role. I'm an internal trainer. I'm an L&D leader. I'm an external trainer or consultant, or something else. Just click one of those buttons. It'll give me a bit of a sense of where everybody is. It'll be very helpful.
I think that may be
all right. So yes. I got the right three things, right? Internal trainer, L&D leader, external trainer, and consultant. Thank you for that, everybody. We'll go ahead and end the poll. And so I guess I'll share it so you all can see it very quickly. Half of us internal, and more than half of us counting someone who's an L&D leader, and then some external folks as well. So I'm glad you're here regardless of what your role is. And it's important for me to know that, because that'll help me adjust a little bit of what we're going to do, of course. And I'll say a little bit more about me in a second. But the question that I have for you now, and what I'd really love for you to do now, is to open up the chat window and get ready to use it. I'd really love it if you turn on your camera, since there's not so many of us. But even if you don't do that, open up the chat window. And the question is, why would you spend your Tuesday evening here? I mean, I know you're in your living room or in your office or whatever. But the question is, why did you come? So just real quickly in the chat, give me a sense of why it is that you chose to spend a little time here this evening. I mean, I love Josh is a perfectly fine answer, but I'm just curious what that reason might be. Give you a second to do that so we can all see him. All right. A few steps ahead. All right, looking to sharpen my skills. The title is intriguing. Sarah, that was my goal. That was my goal. It will actually connect to when we're done. Maybe that'll even make sense. All right. So thank you all for that. And if you're still typing, go ahead and do that. Expanding my skills. And, you know, so in other words, you are the kind of participants that you want to have in your sessions, right? Which totally makes sense. Understand what it takes to be on training to make and effectuate change. Okay, cool. I'm thinking of doing my own thing and I want to know what I have to say. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So let me say, so Josh said a bunch of stuff about me. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff on this slide. But none of that stuff is why I'm here really, except for maybe that fourth bullet that says helped organizations with personal and professional development for 30 plus years. So way in the before times, for those of you that are internal trainers, I was one of you once. And about 29 years ago, I left that job to start a company, which at first was just Kevin, but is now a team of 15 folks spread out around the United States, living in all manner of states, and one person who lives in her RV. And so when Josh and I were talking about me doing a session, I said, well, why don't we talk about us, you know, the roles that we're in. And what have I learned about that over the last 30 years, being really wearing all of the hats at some level that you all wear. And so that's sort of why we're here. And that's maybe a little bit more about why that makes sense for me to do that. And so the reasons I created this, number one is because Josh asked me, but beyond that, because, you know, I know you, although I've not met you. Like I know the roles that you're in. Some of you are in roles that make you our customer or client. There are hats that I have worn, and so I want to maybe share a little bit about what I've learned to answer some of the questions that have been asked 100 times. People like Sarah saying, okay, so if I want to do this, what do I need to do? But it's not just, but where we're headed is not just for Sarah's question, although it will certainly help if she's thinking about that. But I've been asked questions 100 times, like, how did you do it? Why did you do it? How did it work? What did you learn, etc. And I really, regardless of where you're at and what your future is, I think some things we'll talk about tonight will help put you on a path for greater success. That's the bottom line. And maybe, just maybe, some of you are sitting there thinking, man, it's been really hard for the last couple of years. You know, and I had to do a bunch of stuff I didn't used to have to do. And I love being in a classroom with people in front of me, and now I don't have that anymore. And so maybe, just maybe, I can help you rekindle your passion for your work. So that's why I'm here. And that's what I hope that we can spend some time together talking about those things. Okay. And so the question on the table is, if it's, you know, more than being a trainer matters, the question we got to start with, what does it mean to be a trainer? So what does it take to be a great trainer is the question. I'm going to put you in 2 breakout rooms to answer this question in just a second. So be thinking about that. Like, what does it take to be a great trainer? That's the question. And here's how we're going to go into breakouts. So I'm going to put you in 2 breakout rooms in a second. Maybe I am, or maybe I'm going to ask Josh to do that, because right now it's not looking like it's going. I don't know why it's not letting me. Oh, yes, it is. I got it. I got it over here. I will set up those breakout rooms in just a second. And once you get in your groups, you need to quickly determine who your group leader is, and that will be the person whose first name comes last alphabetically. Bernadette, you're safe, right? But if your first name is Tracy, you might end up Vicky. It's a bad sign. Just saying. Okay. Anyway, so that will be your group leader. And the question is, what does it take to be a great trainer? And the group leader is just going to sort of keep track of some of those things and be ready to come back and share with the larger group some of the things that you came up with in your 5 minutes, right? So you got 5 minutes. That's the question. You know who your leader is going to be. And so let me set up the 2 breakout room. Any questions before I do that? All right, now here's the deal. If you've never done this in Zoom before, you're going to get a little button that you have to click, and then that will send you off to your breakout room. All right. Are we ready? I'll see you in 5 minutes. All right. Welcome back, everybody. And so I'm so glad to have you back. And so now I want to hear, and I was correct when I said that Vicky would end up being a group leader. So that's group one. Vicky's group one. So here's the thing. I want you, obviously we're having a conversation in your group, but now you're going to get a chance to hear from the other group as well. And so I just want you listen to the themes and what you notice about the list. And you can think about the conversation you had in your breakout as well as what we get here. So Vicky, what are some of the key things that came out of your group to the question of what makes a great trainer?
Sure. So we discussed the ability to impart information in a way that people can relate and understand and connect to. And then also the ability to adjust to the group or the audience, the dynamic. We talked about knowing your subject matter. So being a subject matter expert. And then we also talked about the opposite side. You may not be the subject matter expert, but you can disseminate the message in a way that people can relate and convey a change of behavior based upon that. So you may not be the subject matter expert, but you know the person that you need to connect to in the event that you have questions that you can address. Okay. We talked about being a connector, a great communicator, keeping people engaged, and what else? Being flexible and being able to adapt to the dynamic of the group.
All right, Sarah, thank you for that, Vicky.
You're welcome.
Sarah, I think you are the other person. Is that correct?
You are correct.
All right. By the way, that's why I picked that. I can look at the list and I'm going to know who the group leader is going to be that way. So, Sarah, what would you have to add to that list?
Yeah. To add to it?
Well, yeah. We just share.
There's things that are definitely going to overlap, obviously.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to go for all of it. So patience, love of learning, being a lifelong learner, good listener, having emotional intelligence, empathy, being curious and open-minded, clear on what you want people to be able to know or to do, and then to make the safe learning environment for people to actually participate. Be learner-centered, so know how to ask the right questions to draw things out of people. Caffeine and water, those were also
caffeine and water makes the list. Okay.
Someone who can recognize like a learning moment. So, I know the other group talked about, the group dynamic, and is there something said, and then, is there time to, take a pause and then address that learning moment. Know how to pivot, so adapt to your environment or just things that, in the space that you're actually training, but then just also in general, like being flexible with what's available. And then being able to manage difficult participants, whether those be the people that are talking a lot and you need to be able to, address them, say, okay, thank you, and then try to draw things out of other people. And then also the difficult participants that don't say absolutely anything and they just look at you. So that is our list. And obviously there's several repeating themes.
Perfect. So everybody, by my quick count, there are 20 items that you all mentioned on this list of what it takes to make a great trainer. I see nodding. And when I wasn't writing the list, I saw nodding and all those sorts of things. So the question is there anything missing? Is there anything missing? So I'll leave that to hang on in your mind for a second. I'm going to say, spoiler alert, yes, this is a fabulous list. Okay, so a long time ago, before I left Chevron and started my venture, I was an internal trainer and consultant working with on a project with an external training firm. and it was a small firm, and they were really smart gentlemen. And I had the chance to chat with them on a number of occasions, and they came to realize that eventually my goal was to do a Sarah and go out on my own. And so one of the gentlemen who was probably approaching my age now, during this conversation, I don't know, 30 years ago, he said, Kevin, if you're going to do this, there are three things that you have to be able to do. He said, there are three things you have to be able to do if you're going to be successful. He says you have to, and he was talking about consulting in general, so you can think about it for your specific situation. He said, Kevin, you have to be able to design it, whatever your it is, right? Training, an asset, whatever it is. Like, you have to be able to design it, right? You have to be able to deliver it. And he said, Kevin, you can't be successful unless you can sell it. Now, you gave me a list of 20 things, which is a fabulous list of the second bullet. A little bit about the first bullet, but it was mostly about the second bullet. Now, I've been at this for a long time, and I obviously remember this story. And yet, I don't think he had it quite right. I actually think there's a fourth pillar, right? So he said there are three: design it, deliver it, and sell it, whatever your it is. But I believe there's one more, and that is you must identify it, what it is, what the need is, what the client needs, so we can design something awesome. I mean, this is internal or external, right? Man, I'm interested in this. I'm curious about this. I have a love of learning. I'm using your words now. And we really ought to have something about this. So I can design it and I can deliver it, and it will be awesome, but it's got to meet a need. And so I have to be able to, we have to be able to identify it before we design it, deliver it, and then ultimately sell it. And so here's sort of the reality that I want to bring to the table. The reality that I want to bring to the table is this, is that we make a mistake. And by the way, it's not just trainers. It's all sorts of people who have a skill that they believe strongly in, right? And so the mistake that we make is that we believe that excellence in design and delivery is enough. Everything that you just said here on this list is correct. And it's table stakes. Like, if you don't have that, right, it doesn't matter, but it's not enough. Here's the truth. The truth is that if you want to have greater impact, it comes from marketing and sales excellence, internal or external, right? And so we're going to talk a lot more about what I mean by that in a second. But the point that I want to make here is that you have chosen to be in this business, or I'm guessing you've chosen truly to be in this business, or you wouldn't show up at an event like this. You wouldn't be a part of L&D Professionals of Greater Philadelphia if this wasn't something that meant something to you. This work matters to you. And so you want to have a greater impact, and to have a greater impact, we have to do more than just be a good trainer. It's not enough. In fact, let me go a little bit further and say, let me give you some examples. Okay. So I don't know if you know this, but when you think about electrification of America, you probably think of Thomas Edison. He's the guy that's famous, like the light bulb and all that other stuff, right? That's all true. But you know that the electricity that we have, alternating current, is not what Edison thought we should have had. He thought we should have had DC. Tesla actually had a better product, not the car, but Tesla had a better product. But we remember Edison. Edison was a master marketer, right? He had a good product. Like, if you couldn't get lights in your house to turn on, it wouldn't matter, right? But he didn't necessarily have the best product. I'll bet some of you have had a cookie from Mrs. Fields. Now, Debbie Fields made a good cookie. Is it the best cookie you ever had? No. It's a fine cookie. It's a good cookie. Jenny is emphatically telling me no in the chat. But, you know, and so it's a fine cookie. It's not the best cookie. But she had greater impact with her cookies because of some skills and some focus beyond the cookie. I looked it up to be sure this morning. Does anybody know, well, before I put the next one up, does anybody know what the best-selling pizza is in America? Number one. We'll put it in the chat. Tell me what you think the number one, who sells the most pizzas? Sarah says Domino's. Anybody have a different answer? I hope it isn't Domino's. Anybody else have an answer? Is it DiGiorno? Is it delivery or is it DiGiorno? Papa John's is like number 4. Number 1, Pizza Hut is number 2. Number 1, Domino's. About 40% over the next one, something like that. So Josh, why did you say you hope it's not Domino's?
Because Domino's is not good pizza.
Okay.
It's not.
What did you say, Bernadette?
I said, no, it is not.
Okay. All right. Now it is pizza. And Kim, are you agreeing or are you disagreeing? You're waving your arm over there.
I am agreeing. That's 3 of us who think it's
Okay.
awful pizza.
All right.
It is.
Okay. I am not here to start pizza wars. I am here to simply make a statement that Thomas Moynihan created the Domino's brand in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Ypsilanti, Michigan, a long time ago, right? Is it the best pizza? Probably not. In fact, all of the ones you named are probably not the best pizza, but they're all pizza and they're all good enough. Now I'm going to go out of sort of these esoteric things. I went from older to newer, and now I'm going to say, what about your favorite thought leader? I'm going to take us right back into training, leadership development, whatever. Is your favorite thought leader the smartest? Are they necessarily the best trainer? Only you can decide, because I don't know who your favorite thought leader is. And I definitely don't want to get into something along the lines of pizza wars there, right? Sarah, we will do not let me forget that. Okay. All right. So I do want to hold it, but don't let me forget it. Okay. So here's the thing, everybody. I can say good enough, and that might make you bristle because you want to be better. And I get that. Right. And I am not saying that we shouldn't become excellent at our craft. I am not saying that. What I'm saying is it's not enough. Even internally. You know, I've been in this business a long time, and I've heard the conversations, and L&D or HR really needs a seat at the table, right? Why don't we get a seat at the table? Well, if we focus only on our craft, why would we get a seat at the table? That's the internal piece of this, right? So I will say this: the trainers who make the biggest impact are business people. They're business people. They think about the business. They understand the business, right? Yeah, we might need to know all the latest whiz-bang technologies and all of the best training exercises, but only should that matter in support of the business objective. Period. Right? And so to take it a step further, the trainers who make the biggest impact are in the sales and marketing business, internally or externally, because that means sales and marketing means that we've got to have something that the organization needs, selling through good design. The design itself, Sarah, still isn't enough unless it's a design that meets the business need, right? But if it meets the business need, awesome. But at the end of the day, what you need is for your customer, internal or external, to believe in you enough and to know that you understand their business need enough to go do to design and deliver, right? Design it and deliver it. And so that this isn't necessarily what we want to hear. I realize that, right? Because now you're saying, okay, Kevin, what about, does that mean training skills don't matter? Do not hear that. That is not what I'm saying. the better we are as a trainer, that's awesome. Like that is awesome. Right. I work on the craft of being better at facilitating learning all the time. But if that's all I work on, I wouldn't have 15 employees and we wouldn't have been doing it for 30 years. I'm just telling you.
Mhm.
It wouldn't be possible because being the best cookie baker isn't enough. Being the best pizza maker isn't enough. Building the best mousetrap isn't enough. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I'm going to stop. And you know, I'll just let you know that, you know, we have a small group, so we have lots of time to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and you're all trainers, so you know that if I'd have had 4 breakout rooms, and we'd already be further on than we are right now, like all of that is true, right? So I'll stop right now and say reactions to anything I've said so far, questions about anything I've said so far, anything before we go on. So we're going to get more practical for you, but this is the thesis of what I'm bringing to you this evening. So questions, thoughts, comments?
Yeah, one of our past speakers for L&D Philly, and he does a lot of speaking in the area, is a guy by the name of Todd Cohen. And I think his main book and presentation is Everybody's in Sales.
Yep, that's true.
Right. And so, you know, it's interesting for me personally as L&D is a second career for me, as it is for many people. You know, we go do something else and find our way into this.
Mhm.
For me, it was sales. And one of my hesitations to get into the kind of work that you do, Kevin, and, you know, venturing out on my own has always been, well, I got into training to get out of sales. Right. Which for a lot of reasons. Having said that, you know, one of the things that people have told me in my internal positions in L&D is about, as a positive quality most of the time, about being persuasive.
Yeah,
But that's sales.
Yeah, so let's I'm glad you said that, because here's the thing. Some people, maybe some of you, when you hear the word sales or selling, you think, I don't know, used car salesman. You think insurance salesman. I don't know, and no disrespect to any of those folks necessarily, but the point is, when I'm using the word sales, I'm using the right word, but ultimately it's about influence. It's about being able to move people
Mhm.
to a new perspective, to take an action. And oh, by the way, if you are really good at your craft of training, you already know how to do that. Like, it wasn't on that list of 20 things, but it should have been. I mean, the 21st thing ought to be something along the lines of able to influence effectively, which is all sales is. Right? Like, if you got learning objectives and your learning at the end, I mean, if you've written good learning objectives, at the end, people need to be able to know or do something when they leave. And ultimately, we know that what we really want them to do is to do what? Apply what they learned. The best trainers are able to influence people to do that when they're not around. That's sales. So if you're sort of stuck around, holy crap, I don't like that, the S word, and I would just say that it's already part of what we have to do. But we have to, if we want to, and again, my whole concept here is, do you want to have greater impact? Right? Because I knew that we would have internal people and folks who are external here. And so if you want to have greater impact inside of your organization, you have to be able to figure out how you can make a bigger difference, which is still sales, right? And it's far easier to sell when you start with that identify it step, as opposed to just, oh, here's what I got, here's my product, now please buy it. But rather, I've created it to meet a need that my customer, internal or external, has. That makes sense? Other reactions, comments before we continue? I'm going to put you back to work here in a minute, but anything else? Anybody?
I think it's really insightful. When you first put us into the breakout room, I was thinking truly just about the delivery. You know, what does it mean? But when we come back here and we sort of expand the view, upward, outward, it all makes perfect sense. And I am thinking about it as an internal trainer to obviously the delivery, because if you are effective and people are applying what they learned, it probably shows up in some metrics report or on some dashboard, some spreadsheet somewhere. But I think about the need to be able to effectively influence both the people that you're training and your broader organization, going upward, going horizontally, and even potentially downward, depending upon your position in the organization.
Well, let's just take a very simple example. Well, it's not a simple example, but a common example, right? You've built a workshop, or you're leading a workshop, and you want people to go out and apply what they learned, and they leave and they're on fire to go do it. But when they go out, they don't get any support from their manager.
Yep.
They don't get any feedback when they leave the comfy confines of Bernadette's workshop. And so while they want to, the change doesn't really get affected because other things aren't happening. So to my point, as a trainer, if our goal is to make that help that behavior change happen, then we know that there are factors outside of our classroom, real or virtual, that are in play here, right? And so we think about that. That means there's a piece to this that goes beyond the skills we need in the classroom.
Yep.
Right? So that's part, I mean, that's like an actual piece of, I mean, that would be an example of what I'm talking about. Kim, was that a hand?
It
Or
was.
are you just wanting to bid on something at the auction?
I scratch my head. No. Well, first of all, I want to say, I think you're absolutely right. And the second thing I want to say is the way that I've gotten around it, because I don't like to sell myself, although I have sold myself to get what I'm going to talk about, is I work primarily as a third-party consultant, which means I have 2 employers and I have 2 organizations, all 4 of whom regularly give me work. And I just do what I enjoy, which is the work itself, the delivery itself. Now, obviously, I had to sell myself to get those opportunities, and I've been very successful. I've never been out of work as an independent for many, many years. But besides that piece of it, once I've sold myself and I've clinched the deal, I just sit back and do what I love to do and let somebody else sell me. Sell the work.
So that's more, I should have said more about, I'm glad that you bring that up. I really do, because here's the thing. You created a way for that to happen, because what this gentleman told me all those years ago, of course I'm on the 4, not the 3, but he says, if you can't do all 3, you have to find a way for those to happen somehow, or you won't succeed. And what Kim is saying is, I didn't like it, but I knew it needed to happen. So I figured out a way so I didn't have to do it. Right. That's the key. So these 4 things have to happen. And if you are in internal in a training team, it's possible that you might not have to be great at all 4, but your team better be, to Kim's point.
Yeah, agreed.
Right. But if you're the trainer, right, then pay heed. Right. Or if you're thinking about being Sarah and going out on your own, unless you can craft another way to get the pieces you don't have, it's going to be challenging. And I'm not just talking about from a business perspective, like Kim and I are talking about, but in terms of being able to have impact, right? We're doing this to make a difference. And ultimately we can make a bigger difference if we can make sure that we can do all 4 of these things one way or another. Like, we could have a whole conversation about the sales and marketing, and we can certainly get to that if you want before we're done. I'm just winding my way back through these in a very unofficial and ineffective way, but it was faster. So, so this is where we're headed next. Okay, so here are the four pillars in 2 columns. What does this look like internally? What does this look like externally? Since there's only 11 of us, we're just going to do it together. So let's think about this for a second internally, right? And so if you're an internal person, this means a little bit more to you, but those of you that are external will have insights in this. So everyone can play as we talk about each of these, right? So when you look at these 4 pillars, identify it, design it, deliver it, sell it with an internal lens, as an internal person. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Thoughts and observations. Anybody? How does that, let me ask it differently. How do those pillars play out in real life if we're internal in our focus? What are your questions about them, or where do you want to go? Mark?
Yes, by the way, I have to apologize for having been in and out, but my wife insisted while it was raining very hard to bring a plant in from the outside, and didn't make a difference that I was soaking wet, but here I am. So
You know what? At the end of the day, Mark,
she's happy.
her being
wife,
happy is
life,
far
right?
more important than anything we're going to say here. Let's just be
Right.
clear.
Anyway, so I always substitute the word understand for identify it. And so when I used to do a lot of training, I haven't lately. I've been a lot of my career over 20 years internal, but also external. And I think sometimes it's harder to be an internal person because you may have some skeptics. So if you understand it and talk the language, and one thing I learned from the Society for ISPI, International Society for Performance Improvement, is
ISPI, yep.
if you don't pay up work up front, you're going to mess up later on. So understanding it means really, is it really a training issue? What is really going on? If they present it as in terms of a solution rather than understanding the problem, et cetera. I think once you understand it, you could do a better job of selling it, because it's really about meeting their needs and helping them understand what the true impact is going to be. Sometimes we may hand it off to someone to design it and to deliver it, but if you're going to deliver it, you also need to understand it quite a bit. And then I think that your example about someone who doesn't have the support or having problems in delivering it, I think if you understand it, you may have a better idea of what the obstacles may be and the hiccups along the way. So you got to do a lot of upfront stuff, and that's been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's the blocking and tackling of Bob Mager. Like, is it a training problem, right? If I put a gun to their head, can they do it? Well, if that's true, then it's not a training problem. And yet oftentimes we end up creating training solutions. Why? Because the client, internal or external, says, we need this.
Yep.
Part of our job, whether it's identify, understand, I love that, Mark. We're really talking exactly the same language here, is being able to ask the right questions, because we need to make sure that what we're going to deliver is going to actually solve their problem.
Yeah, and
Josh said in the chat that good selling is solution selling.
Yeah,
right?
What is it? We need to understand the impact it's supposed to make. And so it's not about how many people are happy with the training program, but did it make a difference? To use correct.
100%. And we all know that. And I guess part of my message is that if we become so solely focused on the craft, then that can get lost. And that ultimately doesn't serve anybody. Right? What about this on the external side? You're up, Jenny. What's your question?
It wasn't a question. It was a comment about the internal, since I've been in internal positions. And I just started a new one in April, and it's my first. I work for a consulting company, and it's my first experience with billable hour environments, where I created a 90-minute training and that was too long. So the settlement was, it was a 30-minute training. So one of the things I'm learning on this new job, this new adventure of trying to build a training culture, which I've done before, but it feels like it's harder now. The identify for me was identifying the right people to be my influencers and advocates and the people that are going to support my programs. And, that was really key. Even getting those 30 minutes, because that led to me getting an hour-long training with another group. because they were at the 30-minute, they were impressed and was like, okay, well, we'll give you an hour to make the world a better place. It's like, okay, cool. So maybe I'll get to 2 hours eventually with some of these programs. But really, the identify for me was really trying to find the right partners. And I would give that advice to Sarah. Yeah, you're listing a lot of stuff that isn't your job, but you know what? And maybe I'm older now, and so I really don't give a damn, but you might need to educate people on what their jobs are by you doing them. Because, you know, stepping on a couple of toes, you know, and depending on how you, maybe don't step on them with like high heel boots, but step on them with sneakers and be gentle. And just kind of find out who your partners are going to be. Because you said that, you know, there's marketing, there's the communications, there's the internal, whatever portal, you know, find out who your partners are going to be so that when these changes can be made, these are the people that are going to help you. So I think that's going to have to be a part of your job, is really going out there and figuring out who can you partner with and stuff. So that was all I wanted to say.
The more that we, and I'm saying this for Sarah, the more that we think of our role as partnering with those folks to solve the business problem, the better chance we have, because we want to be on the same side of the table as them. We need to be on the same side of the table as them. So there's some questions that I would encourage you to ask yourself. As you think about this, whether you're internal, whether you're external, whether you're thinking you want to move from one of those places to the other, I would encourage you, because everything that I've said tonight has been based on the idea of having greater impact, right? So the first question I ask you is, what is my why? And what is the impact that I want to make? And given the answers to those two questions, where does that tell me I might need to focus my development? Right. And so I don't have those answers for you. Those are your questions to answer. But I believe when you answer the first two, you will set yourself up to have a better answer for the third one. And perhaps, just perhaps, and maybe because of some of what we've talked about, you'll think about that differently than you would have before you got here tonight. So I'm going to go back past this slide and say we've got time for maybe one or two more quick questions, if you have a quick question. And then I've got some final things I want to say to give you some very tactical things that you can do, whether you're internal or external. Anybody have something else that you want to ask right now? Anybody? Okay. So my favorite trainer 2-word question in the world. Here it is. Are you ready? It's the question that matters. Like, okay, what am I going to do now, knowing what I now know? It's the question I ask at the end of every one of my podcast interviews. Okay, now what? What are you going to do as a result? Right? And so ultimately, you will need to make that decision. But I have a few things for you to think about, to consider, if you will. And so first, if you're an internal person, which is more than half of you here, if you're internal, I would encourage you to think about, how can I better understand the business? And how would I better understand the goals of the business leaders, which aren't necessarily always the same as the goals of the business, right? I need to understand what's driving the business and understand what's driving the leaders of the business, which will largely be the same, but they won't be entirely the same. And I would encourage you to focus on becoming or being a trusted advisor. Because when you do that, you put yourself in a better position to sell, persuade, influence, whatever that might be. It's the thing that will get you at the table so that you get the chance to design the stuff you want to design, but to get it designed in a way that will have a real business impact, right? And you will have buy-in. I hate that word, but you will have buy-in from people who say, we need to do this. And it's probably more than about an event or about a particular e-learning course, as Sarah says. Okay. And to think about solving problems, not offering training solutions. Josh said good selling is solution selling. I agree with that. Really what I'm saying is, rather than saying, I got this product to sell, say, what's the problem we need to solve? Right. I'll give you a quick example, and this is an external example because that's where I've lived for a longer period of time. I wish I had a dime for every time I got a phone call in the old days or an email in the newer days where someone said, we need to do some team building. Do you do team building events? First of all, it's the wrong question. I mean, I could answer that question and you could say, well, if you want to sell something, you could answer that question, you go do it. But what I'm suggesting is I need to ask another question, like, what's the problem? What are you trying to accomplish? Because here's the thing. Sometimes our client, internal or external, and this I think might be underneath some of what Sarah's challenge is, I think maybe, is that the only thing people know is to ask for the thing they've seen before. So they're asking for that thing rather than they're assuming that that's the solution to their problem. Rather than coming to you and saying, which would be awesome, right? Like, here's my problem. What could you do to help? But rather they come and say, do you do a ropes course? Like, or whatever, like whatever that might be in the case of the team building thing, right? I just want them to like each other. Well, that might not even be the problem, right? To use that example. So, so think about solving problems. And when you do the first two, you put yourself in a better position to do the third. So if you're working externally or thinking about moving in that direction, I would encourage you to build your sales and marketing muscles. You know, if instead of, and Josh, do not tell Cindy Huggett I said this, okay? Instead of picking up Cindy's new book, and I know Cindy, so I'm not really mean that exactly, but metaphorically, instead of picking up Cindy's new book, go read a book about influence. Go read a book about selling, right? Listen to a podcast in that area rather than the next podcast, right?
I was going to say on that note, one of the more influential books that I read during my sales career was Spin Selling.
Yes.
It's a classic for sure.
You know, I don't know how well it still holds up, or in this case in particular, but as trainers, we like to talk a lot. And that was one of the things that it made me realize is do more listening.
Exactly. Which is kind of my advice to Sarah in a way, right? Ask more questions. Focus on becoming a trusted advisor. That's the truth on
Nice,
both
Mark.
sides. Been selling. There it is. Well done. And think about providing value from the client's perspective. Providing value from the client's perspective. Right. And I have to, let me just say this. I have a sales team, right? And I lead our sales team. And I coach them on this all the time. Don't just go in and say, well, we could sell them this workshop. Go in and ask questions. Go in and find out what their needs really are and start to map the solution based on what they're telling you, rather than saying, my job is to go sell this thing. And for all of you that have some little bristling to that word sell, that changes the whole dynamic. As opposed to saying, I got to go sell this thing I got. Right.
Kevin,
Yeah.
I'd say that a key word there is value. A lot of times we talk about value in terms of impact that's measurable, but you know, there is non-measurable value. Sometimes it's just relieving the stress they have that's going on in their organization, or just being better recognized and building their brand, which may be hard to measure. But you know, that's also part of the value from the client's perspective.
And it's value from the client's perspective. They're the deciding factor here, right? And so that's the struggle with Sarah's thing that she's talking about. Like, well, that is the client's perspective, but sometimes we have to help them see something perhaps differently. There's still something they're trying to achieve, and we need to figure out what that is. So I got 3 things for you as we just about are winding up. I'm going to hand it back to Josh in a second. So I just encourage you to think about whatever the most important things you got from this are, and then take some action on those things. And, you know, I've been looking forward to doing this session. I sort of, in a conversation with Josh, I said, how about we do this? And he said, that sounds like a good idea. And so you know, what we've talked about tonight isn't really exactly all of my day job, but I am like you in the business of helping people learn and trying to help improve people's performance, success, confidence, and more. And so if that's a value and you found this useful, I'd love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. In fact, if you go connect with me on LinkedIn, and there's not very many of you, so your odds are pretty good. This isn't like Powerball. If you go and connect with me on LinkedIn, I could just be able to spell my name, and say that you were on the L&D Philly session. In the next couple of days, I'm going to draw a name from those names, and I'm going to send you a note and say, which of my books do you want? I'll give you a list, and then you can tell me which one. I'll sign it and send it to you. So up to you. But if you want to do that, I'd love for you to do that. And if any of this spurs something for you, whether you're an internal or external, and you want some help, or you want to talk about this further in a different situation, you can send me an email and ask a question, or and I don't remember the last time I did this in a public forum, but which is to give you the link to my calendar. But if you want 15 minutes of my time, 30 minutes of my time, based on the stuff we've talked about, if you like that, maybe I could be of help to you or your organization or to you personally, click on the link. If you can find a slot that works for you, I'd be happy to have a quick conversation with you. So there's lots of things that we do every day. One of the ways, when you're an external consultant, one of the ways that you market and sell is to, at least from our perspective, is to work to become a thought leader. And so I do a tremendous amount of writing. I create a lot of video and lots of other stuff on social. So LinkedIn is probably maybe the best place, but you can also find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter. You can even find me on TikTok, for that matter, as an Instagram, like name it. But if there's, if that's something that's useful to you, by all means, look us up, follow us, all those sorts of things. There's our website, kevinikenberry.com. Sometime next week, it will be brand new and updated, but the resources are all there as well now. So I want to thank you all for the chance to be with you and for you to spend some time on a Tuesday evening thinking about important stuff. Like, how can we make a bigger difference in the work that we do? And hopefully what I've shared is, and what we've talked about together, helps you think about some things in a new way. And that maybe, as effective as we want to be as trainers, that's just table stakes. And that there's more that we need to get better at if we want to ultimately have the impact that we can and need to have. So with that, Josh, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you very much. A lot of really good stuff there. And, it's an interesting way to reframe it, especially as, some of us have mentioned that you're considering going out and doing your own thing. I'm personally in that situation and have been resisting it for a long time for the reasons I said previously. And it's a good framing of things. I know, back to like the question to ask is, as an internal, I frequently asked, what problem are we trying to solve? And I think that's a big component of this. So
Sure.
thank you. Real quick, just because I gave him a shout at the top of this, Mark, you mentioned you have an upcoming event that
Yes.
you wanted to mention.
Yes, thanks, Josh. I appreciate that. So I think a lot of you may know that I'm the past president of the Philadelphia chapter for ATD, and I head up the leadership and OD special interest group. We have a program coming up December 8th. It's in the evening. It's hybrid, so it can either be in person or virtual. And it's a panel of chief human resource officers. The title of the program is CHRO's Expectations of the Talent Development / Learning and Development Function. And their head of talent development, learning and development, whether their title is vice president, chief learning officer, whatever, will be there. And this would be a chief human resource officer for Teleflex, for RICO Americas, and for AAA Club Alliance. They all are award-winning, great organizations, and they have great functions, talent development functions. So if you want to hear what their expectation of the function, and therefore of you, either your internal or external, plus is great networking, I would encourage you to go to the website, which is tdphl.org. So www, think of TD as talent development, PHL like the airport, everyone hears me say that, .org, and then go to chapter events and go in and sign up. I think you'll find it. It's
And
at
as a-
Dutch Learning Solutions,
Yeah,
and it's
and
an
Mark,
evening. Oh, I'm sorry, Josh.
as a special favor to us, you're going to ask them what's effective in selling to them as an internal.
Exactly. I mean, listen, if I were in town, I would be there.
I mean,
Because of what we've just
listen-
said tonight, because it may not be your organization if I'm internal, but you're going to get insight. And if you're external, oh my gosh, I would be there.
Well, part of selling it is talking their language.
Yep.
And so when you listen to them, listen to the words they use, even jargon, see what they emphasize, whatever. It'll be at the Judge Learning Solutions, which is south of King of Prussia Mall. And it will be in the evening from 5:38.
Thank you, Mark.
Very much for.
Yeah. No, serious. I'm curious what's an effective sales pitch to a CHRO. So,
Well, actually, minimizing. See, they typically report to the CEO, and so it's about alignment with the business and the strategy. So it may be that people will be able to be productive sooner than without any of the efforts that you do, be it training or OD initiative, whatever, and that means money to them. And I mean, as long as it helps meet the company's strategic objectives and is aligned, that is what they want to hear, because that's what they're responsible for.
awesome. On that note, I'm going to stop the recording.